Good afternoon, everyone. We are not going to belabor the time. This is the NABC quarterly discussion group. Today we have Brother Sankofa, who is going to be speaking to us. And I'd like to let everybody know that NABC is not just a discussion group, we are an actual association. So if you're not a member of NABC, please visit our website, take time to join the organization. I am excited about this topic because whenever we start talking about Black folks, even as Black folks, we don't look at it holistically and we don't take into account the historical piece of it. We are very ahistoric, and we use a lot of the recency effect and look at what is going on now and determine, oh, well, this is why we are where we are. Well, we are where we are because of a conglomerate of things that have happened to us as a people in this country. Um, and not having that historical context and just looking at where we are right now, or even looking at things that have happened within our lifespan or the lifespans of our parents does us a disservice and a disjustice and an injustice rather. So when this was presented, I said, this is a perfect topic. Like we have to jump on this right now. And to have one of our own speaking on it and shedding light on it made me very excited. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Winkler, who is the head of the education division for NABC. And I didn't introduce myself. I'm Dr. Nick. I'm the president of NABC. As you can see, we're pretty casual. We all family. This is recorded. We do upload these recordings to our YouTube page. Yes, NABC has a YouTube page. We have a Facebook, a Twitter, Instagram. We're on all the social media. We're everywhere except for TikTok. We haven't gotten to TikTok yet. But we are everywhere. So you can like us, follow us, subscribe to us. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to you, Dr. Winkler.
Thanks, Dr. Nick. Greetings to all. I appreciate everyone getting on today. I want to talk a little bit about today's speaker. I'll let him introduce himself more formally or what have you, and I'll actually go over his bio briefly. But nonetheless, I want to say I know this dear brother, Brother Sankofa Nicks. He and I have done a lot of work together in the community over various years. I mean, years, nearly 2 decades now. He's not that old. He hasn't even hit 40 as of yet, unless he didn't tell me something. But nonetheless, we've been doing a lot of work in the community from grassroots levels and a lot of healing work in the community. He and I realized that there was a lot that we needed in our community as far as even sharpening our skills. He returned to go back to school and pursue history and Africana studies and African studies and things that nature to aid on a social level. I returned back to school to become a clinician. We've always talked, I've always shared with him things, and he's always shared things with me. And so, yeah, we've done a lot of molding together as far as how we approach the healing for our community. Marcus Sankofa Nicks, I'll go ahead and read his bio as it is written on the NABC's website. It says Marcus Sankofa Nicks is an educator, healer, activist, and historian of African American history and culture. He regularly facilitates conversations surrounding the African American historical experience, the topic of race and its present day implication. He has served in Howard County Public School System of Maryland for 12 years, supporting countless students and staff members of all nationalities, backgrounds, and experiences. During his tenure in the public school system, he has primarily focused his efforts on supporting Black African American students through a culturally relevant, trauma-informed approach. Since then, he has established History Heals Consulting L.L.C, a business devoted to using African American history as a vehicle to aid schools, museums, and institutions in fostering healthy and inclusive environments. He holds a master's of arts degree in African American studies from Morgan State University. His research primarily focuses on the history of African Americans of Howard County in the state of Maryland and throughout the United States. His mission is to empower, educate, and inspire others through the lens of African American culture and history. He is a proud husband, I know this to be true, father, again, I know that to be true, and son of who is passionate about the role of uplifting community. I can vouch for his bio and so much more. I will present to you now, family, Brother Marcus Sankofa Nicks.
Greetings, everybody. First and foremost, I want to make sure that everybody can hear me. If someone could just let me know that I could be heard and received on the other end, that'll be good, and I'll press on from there. So, can I be heard, family? Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. Appreciate that. Okay, I see you.
I can hear you. I'm not sure, but I'm receiving some type of feedback, Mr. Nicks. Brother
Okay.
Sankofa. Yeah, some
Okay.
kind of is a high pitched sound. I'm not sure if it's something going with your mic or.
Okay. Well, where I'm at, I tried to make it as quiet and silent as possible. Even had to relocate into another place. Um, hmm. Do you still hear it as I speak?
Yes. And
Okay, I think
continue.
somebody else said there's an echo as well too. Unless okay, let me see here. Not sure what to do about that echo.
So I wonder, do you have any, by any chance, any earbuds or ear jack, anything like that?
I do. Let me see.
Maybe if you could utilize that, it's kind of like another option is probably to go out and come back in as well.
Okay. Try the headphones on first and see.
Yeah. I'm certain everybody will definitely be very appreciative of your presentation today. I'm excited. I've seen variations of a variety of your presentations. Last week, you blessed us with Mr. Nicks blessed us with a Juneteenth presentation and connected that back with the healing for our community. In fact, that will be coming out. I guess I can say this on my personal YouTube page. I have a lot of speakers coming, and they're all around healing in our community from various ways. You can check that out at Dr. Dennis Asar Winkler. Brother Nicks, are you back?
So I have my headphones in. Can I be heard now?
Oh yeah, you sound good.
Okay, good. Okay.
I think Hertina or whoever else is that. Does it sound good to you all? Much better. Okay, cool. Yes, sir.
Awesome. So let me go ahead and say this. I'm honored and delighted to be here, to be able to be amongst family. Dr. Nick opened up and said we're family, and I'm going to continue those sentiments. And there's layers of family here. I'm glad to now have new family, the likes of you all here tuning in, but I also want to definitely extend my love and appreciation for Dr. Dennis Asar Winkler Jr. I appreciate the opportunity to be here to proclaim what it is that I've had a chance to uncover and unravel as a educator in the K-12 school system, as a museum curator, one who has been in the institution of higher ed, as Dr. Dennis has said, also one who has done extensive work in the community, primarily in Baltimore City and beyond. So I'm honored to be here. I'm delighted to be here. And I don't take opportunities like this for granted. And I definitely want to give definitely a shout out to the National Association of Black Counselors, I believe, for having a space and a platform and an opportunity to be able to have these types of opportunities and forums so we can be able to come together and connect. And so I'm glad to be able to play my role and play my position to be able to help carry out the mission. I saw what's been going on with the work here, and I'm very much impressed and honored and delighted to be in this space. So I do have a PowerPoint, and so if it's all right, Dr. Winkler, I want to go ahead and share that. Is that okay if I go ahead and do that at this time? Okay, let me see if I am. Oops. Okay. Okay, so can everybody see this here on the screen? Okay, I see some yeses. All right. Awesome. Okay, good stuff. Good stuff. So what I want to do with the time that we have today, as it has been circulating on social media, as it's also been put forth on the website, I'm going to be speaking with the topic at hand today, healing through history, healing, wellness, and community care through the lens of Black experiences. Healing through history, healing, wellness, and community care through the lens of Black experiences. I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the ancestors, my ancestors that have gone before us, who have paved the way for us to be here. And so I'm going to recite a passage that Dr. Dennis Winkler knows very well, and one that I know very well, but something to help ground me and us in this space as we move forward together, because I know that I would not be here if it was not for those who came before me. This passage is entitled Oath to Our Ancestors. O ancestors, blacker than 1,000 midnights, African ancestors, it is to you that we, your children, give respect and honor. O ancestors, we call upon you and welcome you in this place. African ancestors, let your presence fill this place. O ancestors, who have been purposely excluded from the history books so that the world would not know of your greatness. Our African ancestors, who gave civilization to the world. Our African ancestors, who gave the arts to the world. Our African ancestors, who gave music to the world. Our African ancestors, who gave the sciences to the world. Our African ancestors, who gave mathematics, medicine, literature, philosophy, even God consciousness to the world. O ancestors, we thank you for devoting your life to make a future for us, your children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. Now, at this time, please stand with us, strengthen us, guide us, teach us, and protect us from the snare of our enemies. Rise up, O African ancestors, and let our enemies be scattered, and give us the wisdom and the boldness to deal with our oppressors and those who would hinder the liberation and empowerment of our people. Rise up, O African ancestors, and live in us. We will not fail to honor you. We will not fail to respect you. We will not fail to hear you. Ashe, ashe, ashe. All right. So I definitely wanted to make sure that I was intentional about referencing our ancestors and those that have come before us. So that being said, I'm excited to be here. We're going to press on. There's a number of things that I wanted to share with us today. And wanted to get my information out. If anybody wanted to follow up with me, if there's any questions or anybody wanted any resources to go further into what I would have shared today, I also have a talk series, History Heals Consulting Talk Series, where Dr. Dennis, Dr. Dahl has been with me a couple of times, and I'm looking forward to him joining me more times again in the near future. But anyways, this is my information, so feel free here to take it down. Let's stay connected. And this QR code here will take you to the website. That also will go more in depth and expound on more of the work that's being done. So here's my info, in case anybody needs that. Just some things to continue to ground the space and set the tone for today. I ask if we can do the best we can to be present, be respectful, be open-minded, be willing to embrace discomfort, be vocal, and be listening. And so I don't have a lot. I know as a teacher, sometimes too many instructions can be a little bit too much, but nevertheless, I want us to be comfortable. I want us to be relaxed, but definitely I want us to be able to learn from each other. So I don't intend to be the sole person talking and sharing here today. Yes, I have been brought here to be able to share and impart what I have uncovered in my field. Yet, I do consider everybody else here a co-presenter. So please, I definitely welcome perspectives and different points of view. And I know that everybody's experiences and stories that they have to share are valid. And so by all means, be present and do what you need to do on your end to stay focused and present in this space. This is a safe space. This is a brave space. And as the African proverb suggests, and I love a good quote, and I love me some African proverbs. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. So today we're going to be taking this journey together. All right. And I'm excited about it. So just want to see who we have here in the virtual room before we get started, or well, we already have got started, but I definitely want to see who we have here in the room. I know that June comes with it a number of different recognitions from PTSD Awareness Month, June being Black Music Month, even though Black music is all day, every day, Juneteenth, which I know many of us have probably been engaged with it or starting to learn about it or have been into that. Father's Day, Men's Health Awareness Month. But I just wanted to open up with just a simple question to get everybody engaged in this conversation and in this presentation today. And the question is this: what you got planned for the summer? It's summertime, y'all. I know where I am. It's hot. I'm here in the suburb of Baltimore, and so peace, brother Warren. Good to see you. But I know it's pretty hot around my way. Peace, Reverend Marlon Kevin Patrick as well too. Got some delightful brothers here with us. But if you care to share, feel free to say your name. Feel free to say where you're tuning in from. And also feel free to share something that you're looking forward to doing this summer. And we can activate the chat, or you can unmute yourself and you can be able to share briefly before we move on. I want to see who we got with us today. Who do we have with us today? So by all means, feel free to go ahead and share so we can get to know each other a little bit more in this space.
Good afternoon. My name is Curtina Kimbrough. I'm tuning in from Ypsilanti, Michigan. I am a licensed professional counselor, experienced in infant mental health, and currently working with OBGYN patients in an outpatient clinic, finishing my last week in that role. I am looking forward to the Lord blessing me with my next opportunity as I try to do things differently to get a different outcome. Thank you for this space and having this program. What am I looking forward to for the summer? Just for it to be better than the last one, whatever that means, whatever that looks like. I'm going to be present and ready to do it all.
All right, then. Thank you for being the first, and thank you for shedding light on what's going on with you with Ypsilanti, Michigan, out in the Midwest. I got family in Chicago and in Indiana and different parts of the Midwest. It's not too far from you. So thanks for tuning in. Anybody else? Yes, thank you. Anybody else? Let's see. We have somebody here. Hi, everyone. Let's see. My name is Hazel. I'm in the state of MA. Was that Massachusetts? Is that what that is? Or Maine, Massachusetts, I think. I plan on being outside. Okay, got you. Okay, enjoying the warmth, enjoying nature, and socializing with others. Good stuff. Connect with nature. Then we also have Stephanie L. Coleman. Hi, everyone. My name is Stephanie, and I'm an LPC in Austin, Texas. Okay, this summer I'm looking forward to returning back to DFW after concluding my adventure there. Okay. Well, Stephanie, glad to have you. Hazel, glad to have you. All right, that came through by way of our chat. Anybody else want to? Yes, Reverend Wally Kevin Patrick, peace to you. Always a blessing to be connected with you, good brother. Is there anyone else? I know we definitely have more who are tuning in.
Peace, brother. Brother Curtis checking in. It's my birthday weekend. Checking in from Virginia Beach. Checking in from Virginia Beach on my birthday weekend. But I have a master's degree in both addictions and mental health counseling. Looking forward to be certified sometime soon. And I reside in the lovely city of Baltimore, Maryland. Thank you.
Brother Warren, man, there's so much I can say about you. Happy birthday, brother. First and foremost. Secondly, all the best to you and your family. And hope you're enjoying your vacation. Yeah, I hope you're enjoying Virginia Beach. Thanks for spending some time with us today. Definitely appreciate it, my brother. So always a pleasure. Always a pleasure. Is there anyone else before we press on? Anybody else before we press on? I guess we can go ahead and press on then. All right, let's go ahead and press on. So when we talk about healing through the lens of history, and what we'll be covering today, these are the touch points of what I would like for us to hit on as a result of our interaction and our engagement today. We're going to be dealing with history, its complexity, the importance of keeping it rich and nuanced, and where we've fallen short in terms of how it's taught and the battles that we still face today. We're going to be talking about counter narratives and how the narratives that we internalize and what becomes stored in our mind and body, spirit, and what becomes ingrained in us, how it affects how we maneuver in society, how it affects how we engage with each other in our relationships. We're going to be talking about community work and Brother Dennis, Dr. Winkler has already hit on this. We're going to be talking about the importance of community work, how that ties into history, and how some of the things that we have done before in the past have really illuminated our minds as to some of the things that have worked and maybe perhaps what has not worked as it pertains to this healing work. We're going to also deal with cultural and historic preservation, which is something that I've gotten into, especially recently, the past couple of years, but the importance of preserving this history and building the legacy of our richness so our children and our children's children's children can be able to inherit something of greatness. And then we're also going to speak about connecting with our roots and what does that really look like and what does that really mean? And we're going to talk. So I also want us to also have a community conversation, okay, for sure. So with that being said, definitely wanted to raise up a perspective from Dr. Joyce King, who said, quote, African-American experiences serve as a pedagogical tool and an educational model indispensable not only to heal the Black community, but also for the health and wellness of everyone in this society, a society traumatized emotionally and spiritually from racial domination. So when we talk about what it is that Dr. Joyce King is saying, the historian, the author, the professor, what she's saying is through the lens of the African experience, through the lens of Black folk, from an African-centered perspective, from an African-centered framework. Not only can these experiences that Black folks have endured be instructive to building a healthy outcome of wellness and healing for Black folk, but it also can be a model that all groups of people, that all walks of life can benefit from. And so I think that's really important. In this work that I've done, oftentimes when you speak about the Black experience historically, other individuals, other people, other groups, then they could quickly then ask, well, what about us? What about our struggles? What about our issues? So through this lens, it doesn't deny any other group their experiences and what they've been through, but nevertheless, it enables us to go into the experiences of what African Americans and what Black folks have experienced. Black folks are not a monolithic group. We don't all think the same, as we even see here in this space. We're not even tuning in from the same place. We have different personalities, different quirks, different circumstances. It is important to understand that as we move forward. I want to first start off with a story. I taught in the Howard County Public School System for 12 years. And the Howard County Public School System is a school system of Howard County. It's right outside of Baltimore, and it's also outside of DC. And so Howard County is kind of sandwiched right in between Washington, DC and Baltimore, Maryland. And I remember spending 7 years in middle school, and I spent 5 years working in the high school level. And I remember, I think it might have been around 2017 going into 2018, the school year, I was informed that I was transitioning to high school. I was no longer going to be teaching in the middle school. And I remember getting prepared to transition to the high school that was near me, Wild Lake High School in Howard County, suburb of Baltimore and DC. And I remember going to the new teacher orientation, those who were coming in, who were going to be starting in the fall, teaching there at the school. And I remember getting a polo shirt that was gold. It was nice. It had, Wild Lake High School on it. The colors were green and gold. And I remember happy and excited after I left the meeting and after I left the orientation for the teachers, for the incoming new teachers. And I remember going to the mall and getting something to eat. I think I might have went to Chipotle or something like that. Chipotle's, I love me some Chipotle, y'all, a spot. And I remember one of the young ladies who was serving my food and who was getting my stuff together, she looked at me and she saw that I had the shirt on and she said, "Do you teach at Wild Lake?" I said, well, no, I don't. I said, I'll be starting, in the fall in a few weeks. And I said, I'm looking forward to it. And she said to me, she said, "You sure you want to teach at Wild Lake? You sure you want to teach there?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm sure." I was excited. I was really looking forward to the experience. And she responded and said, "Well, it's kind of ghetto over there. It's kind of loose. Yeah, it's kind of ratchet. I don't know if you want to teach there. You may want to go to Centennial, or you may want to go to Mount Hebron." And so these schools that she was referencing, are schools that are predominantly white or predominantly Asian. And it took me aback a little bit because I said, wow, here I am excited to go to this school to teach and to be able to continue to share and to pour into young minds. But this young lady here is telling me I need to rethink going to Wild Lake High School to teach, to be a Jegna, to mentor, to do all the things that I do. And so it was insightful because as soon as the school year began, I had a chance to get to know the students. I had a chance to get to know the parents and the families, and I had a chance to get to know the teachers, the administrators. And I realized that young lady's perception and the broader community's perception of many of those individuals who were in that school was false. It was inaccurate. It was distorted. And these narratives that were pervasive out into the community, these narratives that were pretty pervasive out in the broader area, it really cut deep with the students that went to Wild Lake. And I got to know these students very closely. I got to work with them and get to know them on a personal level. A lot of office time, a lot of counseling, and a lot of unpacking stuff, just like many of us do already here in this space. And I decided to write a piece in the school publication, in the school paw print, called "It's Time to Change the Narrative." And the reason why I decided to write about my experience, because I thought it was profound And I thought that it was quite interesting, the fact that many of these students had to move about in the halls and in their classes and throughout that space with this invisible heaviness that they carried with them. Now, it may not have always been able to be visible, but I noticed that many of these students had a chip on their shoulder. Many of these students were frustrated and angry or felt invisible even. And then whenever they realized that there wasn't many who also looked like them in many of these spaces, and as the higher the class went, the more rigorous it was supposed to be, the less those who looked like them, who were teaching and instructing them, it really cut deep. So I decided to write a piece on that, and I decided to speak to what these students have been experiencing, but how these students were still smart. These students were still resilient, and these students were still courageous, despite those debilitating, degrading, even dehumanizing narratives that had been still very, very ever present. So I think that experience there really helped me really just even more conceptualize many of our experiences on a broader scale. This notion of invisible heaviness and carrying this weight. Dr. Nick, before we got started, even spoke about the historic context and the way many of us find ourselves today. And I believe if we don't take a historic approach and really understand how we got here, then our analysis and everything that we view and that we see and conceptualize may potentially be distorted. So how we view the past, how we see the past, very much so affects how we show up today, and it also affects very much so our future. One bit of data that speaks to this in particular is a data piece called Stereotype Threat. And Stereotype Threat was a research project that was done. Beverly Tatum speaks about this. Another person who did this research was Claude Steele from Stanford. But long story short, they took African-American students who were high-level students, high-level intelligence, students who were, smart students, and they broke them up into two groups. And they gave these two groups of students a standardized test. They gave one group, Group A, a test, and they had to check off what race they identified with on a box. They gave the same test to the second group of students that they split up, Group B, but they did not have to check off and identify what race they identified with. What they discovered was that after taking this standardized test, the students who checked off that they were African-American and Black, those students got lower scores on the test. And so what the research furthermore also put forth was that they found that students ended up having performance anxiety when it came to taking their test. What they found was that some students took longer periods of time, students were sweating, students were second guessing themselves, students were anxious, they were nervous, they were uncomfortable, some had to take more frequent breaks. Now, this isn't to suggest that every student who did poorly, it was based on them checking off the box of what race they identified with. And I'm sure many of us know that who we are and what race we claim could even have positive implications, through racial socialization. But what the research also put forth was that there are historic narratives and there are historic through lines that are pervasive and that go from generation to generation to generation that show up in the capacity to exercise and utilize our higher order thinking skills. So what they found that students were more preoccupied in trying to be comfortable in the room and be safe than actually being able to put forth their intellectual capabilities towards the test. They also found, after doing this research more and more, that many students, Black students who were in new academic settings, also had a heightened level of performance anxiety. And much of that anxiety and fear was not to fulfill the stereotype, not to fulfill the stereotype, being intellectually inferior, being dumb, being stupid, being slow, not as good as. And I know many of us probably in this space have probably heard already before, whether somebody said it to us or somebody said it to somebody we know. You got to be twice as good to get half as much based on the stigma of your skin color. So all of these extra mental gymnastics would show up in many ways, not just even in the educational setting. Yet this particular piece of data and research speaks to specifically the educational arena. And so I personally have even seen in many instances, students in one class thrive based on the tone and based on the setting, and students in other classes not thrive based on other factors as well. So when we talk about history is important. And I gotta, definitely bring Dr. John Henrik Clarke, historian, educator, and author, into the conversation. And he tells us, quote, "History is a clock that people use to tell their political and cultural time of day. It is also a compass that people use to find themselves on the map of human geography." So history is important. History is critical. When we meet somebody for the first time, it's not uncommon or far-fetched to ask them where they came from, where they grew up. Perhaps their name may have a story. History is important. Dr. John Henrik Clarke reminds us that it helps us understand what our origin story is. Where do we come from? Where do our people come from? Where are our roots? Where is our starting point? What's the political and cultural time of day? What do we still need to accomplish? What do we still need to address? So history is very much critical. Then we have the perspective of Marcus Garvey, who I'm sure many of us have heard of. And he said these words, quote, "A people without knowledge of their past history, origin, and culture is like a tree without roots." So when we talk about history yet again, and we talk about the correlation and the analogy with a tree and its roots, roots give a people foundation. Roots give a plant or a tree its foundation. It provides nutrients. It provides rooting. It provides sustenance, and it is the source in which the plant derives from. And so when we think about history, when we talk about history, and I'm sure many of us are familiar with what's happening all across the country with efforts to erase history, particularly of Black folks, with efforts to ban many books, particularly by Black folk, with efforts to deny AP African American Studies. Don't talk about 1619 Project, critical race theory. Don't go there. The continuous effort to police the circulation of ideas and who could have exposure and access to it. And when we think about that, it ties perfectly, I believe, into what Marcus Garvey is saying to us in terms of people being without knowledge of their culture and history, being like a tree without roots. And then we think about our history, even on a familial level. If our father was not around, and if our father was gone, if our mother wasn't there like we needed her, that is also history. Perhaps being stripped from our native land and brought here against our will, even though we fought every step of the way, that is also history. And so when we talk about being dislocated and having to be reorientated, all of those things deal with history and our ties to it. Maya Angelou, she says these words, quote, "There is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside of you." And I'm so glad that I have the opportunity as a historian, as a researcher, and as a student to be able to uncover many voices that have not had a chance to be spoken of, and to be able to tell the stories of those who are not able to tell their story. So I'm so honored and glad to be able to do that. Isabel Wilkerson, who has authored a number of books. One of the books that she has put forth, Caste, Origin of Our Discontent, she says these words. She says, when we go to the doctor, they will not begin to treat us without taking our history. And not just our history, but the history of our parents and our grandparents before us. So even as therapists, as clinicians, as counselors, those who are in spaces of mental health and wellness, and those engaging with families and loved ones, our own people, history is important and is connected with all of that as well. Perhaps you might have a new client that you might be seeing. You may have to do an intake form to get their history. As Isabel Wilkerson is saying, even when it comes to seeing a doctor, you might have to bring forth your history. And they may ask you a whole bunch of stuff about what runs in your family that you may have no idea about, because there's so much about our history that we might not know. Even when it comes to getting a job, even when it comes to employment, they may have to do something like a background check. So once again, history affects us on many different levels. It affects us on a personal level. It affects us on a familial level. History affects us on a societal level, even on a global level. And I believe that everybody might not be a historian per se like myself, but everybody may have to utilize some of the skill sets of a historian from time to time, because whenever the clients come or whenever the students come and build those relationships and building that trust and all of those things, you may have to delve into some of that history to see what happened, to be able to then deal with what needs to be addressed to move forward for the better. So when we talk about history, it's important. I'm sure many of us are familiar with ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, which is just another example of how our childhood and what we go through and what we experience affects our health indicators moving forward, our susceptibility to diseases and discomforts and body ailments, and all these different types of things. So once again, I know many of us probably are already aware of these things. However, reminders don't hurt too bad. Reminders can be a good thing. So what I want to do is pause from my talking and have us engage with this image right here, right? You look at it, looks like the woods. Not sure necessarily exactly what time of day it might be, where it particularly might be. But if you can, put yourself in this place and in this space. Imagine you was walking in there by yourself, just you. How would you feel? How would you feel? And I'm going to yet again go back. If you want to open up and share, you can most certainly do so. And you could also drop something in the chat as well too. I see someone, Katina said, I ain't going. Okay, all right, got you. All right, Hazel, if I was there, I may feel lost, maybe a little nervous, unsure of my next steps further along the path. Okay, uneasy and looking to get out. All right.
So can you hear me, brother Nick?
Yeah, I can hear you, brother.
So me, I go into the forest, the woods, it's not uncommon for me. So that looks very tranquil to me. Yeah, so that's what I would feel.
Thank you for sharing, brother. Appreciate that. Anybody else want to offer up your thoughts or reflections about this that we see here? Once again, if you was going through by yourself, now I'll switch it up. Still going through, but you had a few people with you. You had a few close ones with you, family perhaps, relatives, friends. You're not by yourself. Now, how would you feel? Does that change anything or does it not? Okay, I see Stephanie. I'd be cautious of my surroundings, a bit nervous. If I had people, I would definitely feel more at ease. Okay.
Like
Let's
we,
go.
can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
I feel like looking at this, because I always delve a little bit deeper, but I feel like as Black people, we're always in this situation. We just don't necessarily view our situations like this. We're always going into spaces and places, even when we're invited, with a level of uncertainty and fear and trepidation. And we look for somebody else to like kind of nod and show support. So we look for another face that looks like us, but we're always going into a place where we're in fear. And I think that that's kind of become our default, whether we recognize it or not.
So, okay, brother, well, I appreciate that. So what I'm hearing is and correct me if I'm wrong, but there's this vigilance, perhaps even a hypervigilance when we navigate certain spaces, unsure of what to expect or how to show up, what's going to happen, and being extra careful, extra cautious. Is that some of what you're getting at?
That's exactly what I'm getting at.
Okay.
You hit the nail on the head. Like I said, when I see this, I'm like, this is where we are all the time. We just don't recognize it because it doesn't necessarily, our forest doesn't look like this. It could be a corporate setting. It could be what,
okay.
We're always in this forest.
Got you. So it could be in the streets or in the corporate suites or maybe at home even, or out and about. Now, does anybody have a different perspective on that? Dr. Nick, he came and shared what he had to say. Very, very insightful words. Does anybody see it another way? See it from another angle, another vantage point? Anxious for. Oh, go ahead, Dr. Bell.
So I do want to echo what I said. So me growing up with a father from Virginia who loves nature, and also one who practices nature-based therapy. I see a little different, but I do understand because it depends on what force I'm in. That's the nuance that I would have. Like if I'm in Western Maryland, I would feel all of what Dr. Nick is speaking about. Now, if this is Heron Run, which this looks like, or some trail that I'm used to, it can put me in another mode. But definitely, yes.
Absolutely. I see on here it says anxious if alone and less so if with my village. All right. Thanks for sharing that and offering that up. I see a thumbs up by Katina. And so there's a lot more nuance that could, of course, be added here. Where is it? Who you with? What's the purpose for? But my purpose for having us reflect on this image and this visual is because I think one thing could be gathered from this short exercise is that we all are affected in different ways by different things. We're triggered in different ways by different things. Brother Curtis, I see my brother. Go right ahead. I see your hand up. Go right ahead, my brother. You got the floor.
Yeah. Let me say this. So from my perspective as a Black man, whether I'm going in by myself or alone, there's going to be a level of hypervigilance because the manner in which I show up, it doesn't matter who I'm with, I'm always looked upon as the protector. So that level of anxiety of feeling like if something does happen, it's always on me. And I think that's the added sense of pressure when you're looking at a picture or when we're perceiving, potential threat or danger. You know, and one of my colleagues even asked me recently, am I a country mouse or a city mouse? I think it's a white thing, but I'm definitely a city mouse. And I'm going to proceed with apprehension, especially in an environment that doesn't feel comfortable or germane to myself.
Thank you for sharing that, Brother Ward. I appreciate that. So, you know, there's an extra layer of responsibility and duty for a brother like you. And it doesn't matter. I guess what you said, whether you by yourself or with someone else, it's still going to go back to you in terms of how you perceive things and how you show up. And we all do show up in different ways, in different based on our circumstances, our experiences, for sure. I appreciate that, Brother Warren. Anybody else wanna offer something else in regard to this piece here? I'm loving the feedback thus far. Anybody who perhaps hasn't shared anything yet, you're more than welcome to. And so, as I began saying before, there's many things we can surmise from this, but as we look at this experience and put ourselves in the experience, different things affect us in different ways. We all have different backgrounds, different stories, even different experiences, even different triggers. And so I believe that it's so important, and I'm sure many of us probably have heard this before. Maybe some of us might need to be reminded about this, is that the healers, the professionals, the scholars, the activists, the community workers, the therapists, the clinicians, and so on and so forth, because there's so many titles to say, it's important for us to make sure that we take care of ourselves. It's important to be able to make sure that we check in with ourselves, because one thing that may trigger and impact somebody else may impact somebody else in another way. But the more we can get to know ourselves, and the more we can be able to understand how we move and why we move the way we move, then it not only will be able to be a help for us with our own self, but it'll help us with the communities that we serve and those that we engage with and those that we support. James Baldwin said these words. He said, history is not the past, it's the present. We carry our history with us. We are our history. And then Dr. Maria Yellowhorse Braveheart does a lot of work in intergenerational trauma, especially with Native and Indigenous populations. She says history is anything that happens up to a second ago. So once again, we carry our experiences with us. I know Brother Kevin, who's with us, has said many times, use the past as a place of reference, not residence. And unfortunately, we bring a lot of stuff with us. But what I come to share with us today is we don't have to carry the legacy of trauma with us, but we can make sure that we can carry a legacy of prosperity and a legacy of healing and wellness with us. And in fact, even the trauma that we have, we are still imperfectly perfect. That trauma helps us to be who we are, and it has helped cultivate and mold and shape us to be who we are. So perspective is everything. When we talk about historic trauma and dehumanization, once again, we don't know where we're going unless we know where we come from. So day-to-day experiences and the narratives that we internalize, and we talked about our children and our young folk and everything, these things show up. Even going through the woods, we might feel a sensation or feel some kind of tension somewhere in the body based on something that has happened a long time ago. But we may have lost context. We might have forgotten what happened, but history and how it shows up in our body is real. How it affects how we think, it affects how we show up in relationships, it affects our temperament, it affects how we eat, it affects so much more than we can ever imagine. And so when we look at historic inequities, like being denied voting and educational opportunities being denied and restricted, or education being criminalized, or when we look at the risk and danger of even just going to school and what that brought about in terms of hostility and pushback, these are things that just don't go away. These are things that get stored in the body, and it affects outcomes of health and wellness. Even the Green Book that I have here on the slide, I'm sure some of us may understand what that's about, but that Green Book, there was a time that was not that long ago where Black folks had to have this as a passport to be able to travel in certain communities, to stay at a hotel, to get gas, to sleep and get rest, and all of those things. So to what Dr. Nick is saying, I understand the point that he was trying to make from the standpoint that we have had to navigate a society where there were sundown towns. And if a whistle perhaps blew, or the signs might suggest as such, we may have to be up out of there. Or the Green Book might be that ticket to actually help us maneuver from point A to point B, and might be perhaps the difference between life and death. And so when we talk about just trauma, even reconnecting with our loved ones and family members. So Juneteenth, June 19th, Dallas in Texas, there's a whole lot of talk about that, festivals, parades, different programs and different events. But one of the things about that is seeing how so many attempted to try to find their lost loved ones who have been sold away or taken afterwards. Now, to be very clear, Black folks have always tried to find their loved ones if they have been sold away or taken. But you find that that accelerated after that. So today, we're going to talk about how we put these pieces together. When we talk about from the slave trades to domestic violence, Reconstruction, Jim Crow segregation, the Civil Rights Movement, hate crimes, mass incarceration, unjust laws, microaggressions in the workplace and other places, and contemporary struggles, this stuff takes a toll. This stuff takes a toll. And so how does this stuff take a toll? The racial battle fatigue is real. The burnout is real. Somebody even in this space may even need to just be reminded that it's okay to give ourselves permission to step back. It's okay to give ourselves permission to rest, to breathe, and not feel guilty. It's okay to not have to be perfect all the time. Or perhaps we might not need to necessarily always be as vigilant as we might think we might need to. So we show up in this conversation in different ways. When we talk about how things affect us, this is just a snapshot in a list of how things affect how we think, how we see the world, how we show up. And so being able to check in with ourselves, being able to get to know ourselves on a deeper level can help us understand why we do the things we do, or how we got to this point. And then it can help us to then show up in a more fuller sense in this world. Anthony Browder, a dear historian and scholar in his own right, said that the memory has been erased and the erasure has been forgotten. So we must tap into our collective memory and never forget where we come from. That is critical and that is important. And so when it comes to even on an individual level or on a group level, how do we address what has happened? How do we address what has happened and then move forward from there? And I believe that when we think about how we show up, trust, being a perfectionist, sleep and anxiety and all these types of things. These things could be entry points to help us really investigate ourselves and why we do the things that we do. But one of the things that has been eye-opening to me, and I have to give credit to my dear beloved brother, Dr. Dennis Asar Winkler, who's with us. He brought forth some research and some data to my attention called post-traumatic growth. And so when we talk about post-traumatic growth, whether it's loss or grief, or whether it's traumatic situations, whether it's high stress, or whether it is situations that have been traumatic, those who go through it and are able to come out of it in a certain way, perhaps be able to overcome in a certain way, or maneuver through it a certain way, and those who are not able to move forward in the same capacity, oftentimes there's a difference in outlook, a difference in how we make meaning of the situation. And when you think about even the COVID-19 pandemic that was with us a few years ago, and I believe that we still are impacted by what happened just a few years ago, when people were losing their lives and when people were getting sick and people were couldn't be as mobile as much as they used to be. For many, it gave them a different outlook on life. Even the research supported that many started to do family history. Ancestry.com, people started ordering them kits, doing tests, trying to see where they come from, their roots. And so post-traumatic growth is really a research framework that helps us be able to look at how we go through stuff and how we come out of it better than we did before we encountered that traumatic event or ordeal. And so those who have been able to grow and recover well from the trauma that they've been through, usually some of the things that have been reported has been a greater sense of personal strength, increased exploration of existential questions like death and purpose, increased value placed on the small things in life, changes in spiritual and religious areas of life, improved relationships, new possibilities for life, greater appreciation for life or gratitude, and greater compassion for others. So once again, these narratives and how we take what has happened and how we find new meaning. And I believe when we talk about healing through history, to keep this centered on the topic at hand, healing through history for wellness and community care and mental health, our belief system, our attitude, how we make meaning out of our situation is a huge, huge, huge factor in terms of how we overcome our situations. And I know many of us take that same outlook and we support others in helping them to reframe how they view the situation, to restructure cognitively how they analyze the situation. And oftentimes, there might be some distortions in how we perceive what has happened, and therefore those distortions show up in how we view and conceptualize and make sense of things in the present. Even when we talk about the story of Opal Lee and Juneteenth, and I'm not going to make this a Juneteenth lecture, but I did just want to raise up the fact that even the story of Opal Lee, who was deemed the grandmother of Juneteenth, she took a traumatic experience, June 19, 1939, in Texas, as a Texan, at the tender age of 12, when 500 white rioters burned down her childhood home because her family was moving into an area that was more white. And so she remembered that experience, and she carried that experience with her. She carried that trauma with her. And at the age of 94 years old, one of the ways she made meaning of that situation was to organize rallies and to write letters to the powers that be and speaking truth to power and marching and walking hundreds and hundreds of miles. I think that he said that this woman even walked from Texas to DC, all to advocate for Juneteenth to become a federally mandated holiday. So when we talk about how we make meaning of what we go through, it's relevant because of the time of year we're at, but this story of Opal Lee is very much indicative of that. And I think that's important to raise up as well too. Some other ways in which we can make meaning out of history. History doesn't have to do us in. History doesn't have to have us not like who we are, or have us believe we're inferior, or have us only view things through a deficit lens. But a Philadelphia man completed an over 400-mile walk along the Underground Railroad in honor of Harriet Tubman. So that's a way in which we can be inspired. There's a gentleman named Joseph McGill Jr. who wrote a book called Seeking of the Ancestors. And one of the ways in which he was able to connect with his roots and be able to use history, his history, as a way to inspire and as a way to develop more meaning for him in his life, he ended up going from plantation to plantation to plantation. And he would sleep in the slave dwellings. He would sleep in the cabins. He would sleep in the quarters to be able to confront and put himself in the place and in the space of where his ancestors were. Another example for us, Lauryn Hill, who I know many of us know, the songwriter, the poet, the actress, the one who received world acclaim for her legendary album, The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill. But I did not know until recently that she was inspired and uplifted to even title that album, The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill, from the father of Black history himself, Dr. Carter G. Woodson, second African-American to graduate with a PhD from Harvard University, 1912. So once again, history can do us in, and it can be traumatic, but we also have agency. We also have the capacity to redefine what it means for us. We have the capacity to change the narrative. And so these are some examples of that being done. As we see here in the museum sector, in the museum world, which I spend a lot of time as a museum consultant, spending time organizing and setting up exhibits and displays and telling narratives to artifacts and ephemera and through different souvenirs and historic pieces, we see that the trend since 2021 is spiking upward. So once again, we see, even though all throughout the country, there are efforts to intentionally reduce, delegitimize, and diminish Black history from being taught, there are still institutions, and this is what African Americans have always done, is create parallel institutions to be able to still educate our young people and our elders and to be able to find ways to pass down that history. So people are coming into the museums, and this is now what people are really looking at in terms of what is a trusted authority and a trusted source when it comes to history. The close number 2 is historic sites, and then number 3 is documentary films and videos. When it comes to preservation and preserving that legacy, Black museums have always been critical, not just educational spaces, but Black museums. There's a book called From Storefront to Monument, Tracing the Public History of the Black Museum Movement. So even taking it back to Hampton University, 1868, and other HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities, these were some of the places that had gallery spaces in their libraries and display areas which spoke to these narratives to be told from Black voices. The pride that came with it, the stories that came with it, from those who came up off of a plantation and then finally having a chance to attend an HBCU. And we see the historic ties and the historic events that took place that really brought forth the efforts to be able to do this. So once again, it's a part of the culture in terms of preservation and cultural restoration. Dr. Martin Luther King, and this is a part of his legacy that is oftentimes not talked about. We hear about him as an organizer. We hear about him, I have a dream. And we hear about the protests and the marches and the Nobel Peace Prize in 1968 and the stance on the war. But when he was a youngster at Morehouse for the summer, he would go to Connecticut and he engaged in a restoration project where he helped restore a tobacco shade housing complex when he was young, and him being able to restore something that was historic, that was part of the Coleman brothers' legacy, for him to be able to even travel to Connecticut and see Black folks being able to sit in spaces and eat, and seeing Black folks being able to experience certain levels of freedom, that was a huge deal. So once again, how we engage with history, there's all different types of ways that we can engage with history to bring forth meaning and to uplift us. Okay. Before I move forward, are there any questions? I just want to do a check-in, make sure we're good. How we doing? How we doing? Are we doing all right? Quiet. Make sure we good. We good?
Quick question. I am doing all right, and this is wonderful information. I just shared recently with a friend that history has never been interesting to me because it was never taught with interest. It was never taught about me. It was white Eurocentric, and I had no love for it. I did it because I needed to pass the class to matriculate to the next grade. And she recommended some books for me to, because I do want the knowledge, but I want the truth. I want the information about my heritage. But my question is, I know that a lot of people go back to plantations and to relive, and the Whitney plantation is one of the big ones. I have a hard time putting my mind in that space because of what it represented, coming from yourself and the panel, the group. Is that something you all think would be educationally beneficial, though I feel it would be harmful emotionally?
That's a great question, and I really appreciate you for asking that. So it's definitely understandable. Going back to plantations. I know there's a book by Clint Smith called How the Word is Passed. Some of us may have heard of. I referenced Sleep with the Ancestors, Joseph McGill, and there are the likes of others who have used these plantations as a way to explore. I think one of the things about that history is it can be re-traumatizing, or it can be re-triggering. But I think about the strength that even comes with those stories. Being able to still invent things under the oppressive thumb of enslavement, even the resistance and efforts to try to survive and maintain for yourself and family and loved ones amidst enslavement. Even the uprisings, and even there's so much richness. I think that a huge part of it is not always necessarily going on site. That could be a part of it, but also how we tell the story. And I think there's even strength, even in enslavement, seeing what we were able to do during that time. And so I think that it's important to keep these stories rich and not just very narrow. Black folks were slaves. They didn't have any rights. In fact, they were happy-go-lucky and appreciated being enslaved. I think we have to push back against some of that. But I do think a lot of strength can come from that. And I think that we show up in different ways with different levels of sensitivity to it. So I definitely think that Yeah, it's a great question. And I'm definitely open for anybody else who may want to also chime in on that question as well too.
Can you hear me okay?
I think I can now. First, it was a little bit choppy and shaky, but I think I can. Go ahead, brother. Go ahead, brother Warren. Go ahead.
I'm in the tunnel. A great book. I Call You My Wife. It is a series of letters, love letters.
I'm not able to hear you too. I'm not able to hear you too clear, brother Warren.
Okay, is this better? I'm in a tunnel. I'm about to leave the tunnel. Can you now?
You want us to? We can always come back once you're out of the tunnel. Okay, we'll come back to Brother Warren. Did somebody else have something they wanted to share?
Yeah, if I could,
Sure.
kind of add until Brother Warren comes back. I think that when we think about it, and I appreciate you offering this space, and I appreciate the question too. I think when we think about it, right, the way that we can frame this, and this is how I do it, I look at it as a clinician, and how do we look at trauma as pertains to the individual, right? And we know that trauma, part of the trauma is really facing the trauma, right? It's really that trauma that's stuck inside of our bodies, right? Part of the process of really dealing with trauma for many, it's really processing or as I guess what Resma speaks to is what he call it, metabolizing that trauma, right? So I think that it's really a great question because we can be re-triggered. Now, what we do at some of the more basic levels when we deal with these type of exposure activities, I guess I can call it, we can prepare ourselves to regulate ourselves, regulate our emotions, to go through that process, so that it doesn't have as much power over us as it does. Because much of the work that I do is around race-based trauma, and lots of times because we have not really dealt with that trauma, it really has us. So I think there can be some benefit, but as we deal with and as we work with our clients, I think we have to be real, we have to be, everybody can't do the same amount. Everybody's not ready. But yeah, I think it can be very beneficial in integrating both sides of our brain and our images and all these type of things. As brother Sankofa is saying, this is really like looking at, like, widening to perspective, adding the missing pieces. Because as we know about trauma, we see that when we've been when we're traumatized or in a traumatic state, we see things in fragments. So he's not only just saying, let's go in and deal with, the traumas and the atrocities that occurred, but also let's go in and look at the victories that have occurred. Let's look at the whole picture. And we understand that when we can reframe that picture, that narrative that he speaks about, then there's also the possibility of that post-traumatic growth. There's a possibility of that healing from that trauma, or and so on. So yeah, that's what.
Yeah, can I jump in real quick?
Oh yeah. Go right ahead, Brother Warren.
Yeah, I think that, part of, what the brother just said as far as reframing this narrative, it really helped me to begin to shift my paradigm when I stopped looking at these enslaved individuals as slaves. And I know that's something very fundamental that, you know, we have already processed and went through that process of beginning to reframe the difference between and redefine what is a slave and what is someone that was enslaved, right? And I think beyond that, what also helped me is a sister by the name of Rita Roberts wrote a book called I Can't Wait to Call You My Wife, African-American Letters of Love and Family in the Civil War Era. Because what it did, it gave a level of humanity to see these enslaved brothers and sisters as men and women that were still having very human experiences. And at a time when we looked at them as being, you know, just the most horrific type of experiences, but they still found joy, happiness, and had the same full range of emotions that we were experiencing today. And when you read some of these letters, it will help you begin to humanize these enslaved Africans and redefine the experience and look at it through another portal. So I just want to share that.
Brother Warren, I appreciate what you had to say. I appreciate what Dr. Dennis had to say. And then, Sister Bond, I appreciate what you have here in the chat. My personal opinion is that I talked to the creator of my ancestors first, but I know I must know myself well enough to know how much I can hold. Dr. Bonnie. So I thank you for offering that up as well, too. To what you said, Brother Warren, I don't know if everybody can see this here, but I have a couple of documents here. These are some primary source documents. It's a glare here, but what I'm holding up for those that can see it, I'll even bring them a little bit closer. It's an inventory of enslaved people from a plantation that is locally in my area historically. And so to your point, part of that reframing, and there's so much that we have internalized, we might not even know the depths of really all that we have taken in and what we believe to be true, or what we've just taken in because it always was that kind of way that we just viewed it and we just kept going through the motions. But this inventory, these family members, these sons and daughters and fathers and wives and women and husbands and cousins, aunts and uncles and nieces and nephews, they're identified as enslaved beings. They're identified as commodities. 3 out of every 5, or the average person was sold who was enslaved. They were sold on average 3 to 5 times. I know soon we'll be at the 4th of July. I know soon we'll be able to smell the cookout food and the fireworks are going to be blazing, and you know, many will be engaging in the festivities. But you know, by 1776, and I have the Declaration of Independence here and the signing of it. Many of our ancestors were toiling on the plantation. But yet, as we reframe, as Brother Warren said, looking at enslaved beings, it doesn't mean that because some would say you're romanticizing the institution if you don't acknowledge or address the harsh realities that they experienced. And what I put forth and what I argue is that I think there's room to do both. There's room to, on one side, acknowledge the horrific, degrading, violent, traumatic circumstances. But I think it's also important to speak to, as Dr. Dahl said, the victories, or what was the pushback, or how did they still maintain relationships or intimacy in various ways? How did they still teach each other? How did they strategize? How did they cleverly use their resources to pull together? And so when we talk about healing through history, I believe that many of the things that much of what we can glean from there's some great examples, some shining examples of what have happened before in the past that we can use to this day. So I definitely appreciate the question and all the comments and all the responses to it. Yeah, for sure. Yes, sir.
If I can even add to what you just said, because we can talk about what happened and how we coped, and that's one thing, right? And I think that's great, because I think a lot of us, we cope in society, we cope with oppression daily. But I think to just add and further what you said is, how did our ancestors get us to what is called emancipation? Because it wasn't something that was just given to us. It wasn't just as easy as we articulated. The white man signed the paper. So I think that when you look at how you aided and how we aided and how we brought along that process, it's very important as well. Because when we talk about trauma, when you feel like you've been oppressed, or you had no power, when you were overwhelmed, when you were hopeless, when you're weak, that is what brings about a traumatic state. So we also repaint the narrative of resistance and resiliency and also liberation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I definitely appreciate that. Stephanie, I'm with you with the hand clap as well, too. And yeah, I mean, for sure. I wholeheartedly agree with that. And so as we continue to do this work ourselves, I also want to say that that's going to then open up opportunities to even make further strides with those who we care for. And I would even say that when we go to these plantations, I believe as we're telling the story, you know, and I say we as in the curators and the people who were at these plantations and stuff, well, there's some work that has to be done with those telling the story as well, too, the language that we use, how mindful we are as well. So, yeah, but I appreciate what everybody has offered up and shared with that. I have a clip that I want to show, and I'm not sure if it's gonna how it's gonna come through, if everybody will be able to hear it and see it. But I think it's definitely inspirational and insightful how history has really impacted this elder here, and how it's really brought extra meaning in her life. So I'm going to press play, and hopefully everybody can be able to see it and be able to hear it. All right.
We can't hear it. You might have to switch, go to the share screen and put share by audio.
Go. You speaking to me, Dr. Dahl?
Yes, you may have to go to how you share, and then click include audio, computer's audio.
Okay, go to share. Am I where you're speaking of right here?
I can't hear. I mean, I can't see exactly what you're doing, but typically, when you're sharing the screen on Zoom, you also include. There's a checkbox or sorts that's like you have to probably go out and come back in, like unshare your screen, and when you're about to share it again, make sure you click share computer's audio.
Okay, let me try that. Okay. Share. Okay, got it. Perfect. I think I got what you're saying. All right. I'm gonna go ahead and press play.
It's described as one of the most important collections of African American history ever assembled.
Can that be heard?
But it's not found in any museum. It's housed in the Staten Island, New York home of 90-year-old Elizabeth Meters. For the past 60 years, this former New York City school teacher has been assembling artifacts that document the entirety of the African American experience, from the nation's beginning to the current day.
This is a display of abolition and slavery
telling stories filled with tears and triumphs, with one mission in mind.
My mission in collecting this particular African American history collection is to create a patriotic healing and teaching instrument to compensate for the fact that as a teacher and just as an ordinary citizen, I know that African American history has been completely omitted from American history.
Meador's African American History Trust collection features over 20,000 individual items.
And over here we have an authentic baton that belonged to Cab Calloway. Here's an autographed picture of him with his baton making great music.
There are personal letters from historic icons.
This is a Martin Luther King signed civil rights letter.
And memorabilia from the world of sports.
Over here we have a life-size wax figure that came out of a wax museum of Hank Aaron, an important, iconic African-American sports hero. In this corner, we have a bronze statue of Joe Louis, and on the bottom, a pair of Muhammad Ali's fight-worn shoes.
The items fill every nook and cranny of Meador's home, and that's not an exaggeration. But as she enters her 90s, Meador's made the tough decision to part ways with her collection by putting it up for auction, not as individual pieces, but sold intact.
You know, even collectors reach the end of the road, and when you're as old as I now am, it's important to take on the responsibility of making sure that it has another life.
Elizabeth Meador's collection is nothing short of extraordinary.
Arlen Ettinger is the president of Guernsey's auction house.
I hadn't seen anything like before, nor have I seen anything like it since. A collection that comprehensively documents the African American experience in ways that much smarter people than I, much more knowledgeable people than I, think is the finest collection of its type in existence. So it's overwhelming.
Over here I have weaponry from the Civil War.
Estimates of the collection's value vary, but it could be worth as much as $10 million.
I'm shocked to know that a Pokemon card can go for $1 million and that Marilyn Monroe's dress can go for $5 million. And so my question really is, how much does America value American history? I have no idea. And I have only a prayer that I send out with this collection.
And, you know, Meador's obviously wants to keep it intact. That auction is going to start next month at Guernsey's. Really interesting. She took odd jobs to finance this, mortgaged her house a few times, and it started with admiration for Jackie Robinson, and it just inspired her to keep going.
It's amazing how much she's focused on the next generation and making sure all of this stuff ends up in the right hands and
for all to see, let's hope.
Yeah, I'm surprised she didn't have a second life as a curator in the museum someplace. I'm sure the Smithsonian
She sort of did.
knocked on her door.
Okay, so did anybody have any thoughts or reflections on this elder here? I think it's pretty clear to see history, how it's brought forth meaning in her life and how it's made a difference and an impact. Anybody want to share anything, any thoughts, reflections, or insights?
I hope I'm being heard. I don't know for sure if you can hear me.
I can hear you. I can't see for everybody else, but you're fine over here with me. I can hear you.
Okay. Hi, Dr. Bonnie, Chicagoland. I'm almost speechless. For me, the piece that stands out so much is that she really is basically an ordinary citizen. And how in the world did she put so much dedication over so many decades into this project? And very quickly, if I can go back to our comments on the USCT, by training, I'm a clinical psychologist, but I'm much more proud of my work as a family genealogist. I have worked on the USCT part of my family, uncovering 36 folks, men who served. One of my greatest touching moments was finding out that Alfred Berryman, an ancestor who enlisted as basically a self-emancipated person, that on his entry papers he signed with an X, but when he left the military, he was able to sign his name, and that gave me a lot of strength when I have had difficult situations. So that's just for me. Thanks for having me.
No problem. That is, well, you are an inspiration as well, because the work you're doing to uncover 37 USCT colored troops. Oh, that's huge. The role that the colored troops and the Black soldiers played to really make the outcome be what it was with the Union and Confederate, and the bravery and what went into that. That is awesome. And so, yeah, that's a great work you're doing. So, yes. And once again, when you say that she's an ordinary person, who are we to each other? Who are we to the powers that be, but who are we to each other? So I would say that this elder here is a giant. She and you are a giant. And you all are both doing great things, but nevertheless, yeah, definitely so. I'm trying to do a little bit of genealogy myself. Got a long way to go, but I'm trying to piece the dots together. Maybe you can even give me some pointers how I can uncover some stuff. Yeah. Anybody else want to share anything or any reflections about the clip we just viewed? Okay. Well, I'll say this. I think somebody put in the chat that, hopefully that the works go to a responsible Black organization and institution. And so there's, that could be instructive for us. When we talk about history, there's many different ways, when we talk about not just the teaching of it and learning and knowing it, but how do we preserve it and leave it for those to come? And so they had said that one of her main motivations, which fueled and sparked her tenacity and her being so driven and determined, as they said, was to make sure that those who come after her would have a chance to embrace what she had. But I think it is important to keep these precious items in the hands of those who are passionate, in the hands of those who have good intention, and those who can, those who preserve those Black images, those Black stories. So that's important as well too.
I am obsessed with collecting.
Going to the next one. There we go. So as we talk about healing and history and how that intersects, one of the things that has been really, really critical is dealing with grief. And there's different types of grief, from the loss of a loved one, someone transitioning, passing on. Perhaps you might not be in a relationship with somebody you once was in, or organizational or institutional grief. Perhaps you're not with a certain group in the way that you once was before. In the book, where is it at here? Help Me to Find My People by Heather Andrea Williams, when she talks about Black folks trying to put up ads and find their lost loved ones and family reunions occurring after enslavement. She speaks about this notion of ambiguous grief. And what she means when she speaks about ambiguous grief is grief where you're out of touch with your loved one, but you still believe they might still be living. And so they may not be amongst you, but you still believe they're alive, and you're pursuing where they are in hopes that you'll be able to discover them. But these are just, as you see on this slide here, some practical ways that we could use the memory of people that have passed on, how we can still keep their essence and their spirit alive and well. And this really spoke to me because, as we speak about, as I mentioned already in this conversation, even within the past couple of years, seeing perhaps people losing their life or people having health challenges or different things, there's things that we can do to still ensure that we preserve their legacy. Whether we create an altar, establish new traditions, scrapbooking, grave sites, social media platforms in their honor. I know even Dr. Dennis, his beloved wife, Camille, she has some drinks in honor of her husband. She's quite a chef. There's a family restaurant that has been established here in Baltimore.
I'm still living, by the way. I'm still living. So her father.
Yes, her father, her father, Mr. Matt. There's drinks that are associated with his legacy, and so being creative, there's ways that we could still, keep the names and the spirit still alive and well. And from an African-centered perspective, those who have passed on, they're not completely gone, but their essence and their spirit is always still here with us. So these are the things that could help us pull through ancestral veneration or finding strength in something beyond ourselves and having ways to memorialize and to commemorate. And many of these things that we do, Memorial Day, Juneteenth and Tulsa, so on and so forth, these are rooted in traditions and things that we always have done. The difference is that it's more publicized now, but these are many of the things that we've always tapped into to restore ourselves. One of the things that's also starting to become a growing thing is local history. People wanting to engage with local history to connect with their roots. And even in Howard County, where I reside, 68% of individuals from a survey in 2021 said that they'd rather come to Howard County to learn local history and to visit historic sites. So once again, where does the name of your street derive from? The school that you went to, the land your house is sitting on top of, the complex the apartment building is situated at. There's history there too. So history is always talking to us and it's always speaking to us. I believe, as it's already been said, that history can be something that can help us empathize with each other. History can be something that can inspire each other and ourselves. History can give us gratitude. It can help us to connect. And history is something that can help us to humanize ourselves, as Brother Curtis Warren so eloquently stated. It enables us to humanize each other. Dr. Dennis Alsar Winkler has many things that he has said in time that I found profound, that I've taken notes on. But one of the things that I think is really critical that he said before in our interaction, in our conversations, is as when he says, that which is right is that which is unifying. In other words, and he can correct me if I'm wrong, this is my interpretation of that passage, there's so many warring ideals and conflicting narratives, even those trying to control the narrative. And even in our relationships, being stubborn, trying to stay steadfast to our beliefs and what we believe is true, our way. The only way to see it is our view, our way of seeing it and doing it. However, I think a healthy way is for us to be able to acknowledge the other side, but still be able to come together and connect. And we have so much in common, and we might not agree on everything, and that's okay. We might not agree on everything, but how can we be intentional about finding the ways that we can still connect? How can we feel? How can we be able to get more close and personal? And I think that one of the things that we've seen from the pandemic was an interruption of some of those tendencies. I just have a couple images. I don't have too much more here, but I just wanted to lift this up because when we talk about these narratives are not just verbally told to us. These narratives that are passed down also permeate music. These narratives that are passed down are in art. They're in cartoons. They're in lyrics to songs. They're in poetry. And so as we look at this image here, and if it brings up some discomfort and some tough feelings, I understand for sure. And I want to acknowledge that. But what do we feel, or what comes to mind when we look at images like this? What does it say to us? What does it speak to?
At another time in my life, an image like this was used to control, subjugate, embarrass me and others like me. Now I've unmasked it and I see it for what it truly is. A struggling, pathetic type of peoples who fear others who are very much their equal, and in some cases their superior. And when I look at it now with a gentle eye, I see a beautiful child enjoying a piece of fruit. And that's what I see, not what somebody else is trying to control me to see.
Well, I thank you for sharing that. I see in the chat here, anger, romanticizing, and atrocity. My interpretation is it's a forced smile. So the watermelon stereotype, the stereotype that really became commonplace, especially after emancipation, and the ridicule and all that came with Black folks engaging in it. But once again, it speaks to the power of narratives and how things can be stories can be created and others can buy into it and believe it as if it is true, as if it is legitimate. And there's countless examples. And I don't have time to get into all the examples, of course, but even looking at in academia and even in the scientific fields, trying to prove inferiority and and being subhuman without concrete evidence, without the data to back it and support it. And so images are huge in terms of how these narratives are framed and how they're shaped. Now, this is another image. Now, this is an image called The Hunted Slave by Richard Ansdell. And for the sake of time, I won't spend too much time with this one here. But as you look closely, there's a number of things that you can see. You have the dogs here that look like they may be in the process of trying to attack this Black man and this Black woman. One dog has already been slayed or has already been put down. 2 others are coming. Some of the comments that have been shared to me in other instances and in other times was this Black man protecting this woman. Perhaps there's some kind of kinship or love, or perhaps some closeness there. And there's bravery there because on the bottom right-hand side, it may be hard to see, but there's a snake that's coiled around the log on the bottom right-hand side, which would denote that there's danger lurking on every leaning side. So how brave was it to still be able to try to press on to the freedom land and to press on to freedom amidst the challenge, the uncertainty, the anxiety, all those types of things. And to me, that's inspiring, it's courageous, it's brave. And so images are huge. And really around this time, you started to see more images showing Black folks having agency and showing them not being docile victims, but actually, standing up. So how we imagine images is very important as well, too. When we talk about perspectives, I always talk about the importance of language. Harriet Tubman from Dorchester County, Maryland native, 13 trips, never lost a passenger, never got caught. And I remember when I first encountered who she was and what she represented, these were a lot of the terms that were bestowed upon her. A slave, being a servant, being scared, poor, mistreated, all those types of things. But once again, when it comes to these narratives, language makes a huge difference. She was a leader. She was courageous, all 5 foot tall of her. She was bold. She was tenacious. She was an abolitionist, and she also, fought for other people and consulted others who were trying to get free. She was definitely clever and strategic, and she was a planner. She was a freedom fighter, and many, many other things. When we look at Frederick Douglass, one of the things that he did to facilitate his healing process as a young enslaved boy who was not allowed to read, he began to write. And he said that writing and journaling gave tongue to his experiences as a formerly enslaved young man. And so writing was a cathartic experience. It helped him change the narrative of his own trajectory. So not just him, but other people could view enslaved people as human beings and not as commodities. And he ended up writing 3 books, but the first one is the narrative in the life of Frederick Douglass. We also see the incidents in the life of an enslaved girl, Harriet Jacobs. I know many of us know Harriet Tubman, but Harriet Jacobs even speaks about writing and saying in her writing that, she to mama, she wasn't so lonely if she could write to her mother in her book. Her mother had passed away, but in writing, that was a way that she could connect with her mother, who was an ancestor. And that was a way that she facilitated her healing process. And she would go on to be a writer and a publisher, and she would, find a way to get free as well too. But just the ingenuity and the cleverness and the resourcefulness and the intelligence is just inspiring. You see a host of other people here who all have compelling stories. I don't have time to get into today, but they all changed the narrative in their own way. They wrote Black textbooks. They were researchers. Some of them came up under the oppressive thumb of enslavement and not only liberated themselves, but also liberated their people as well too. We speak about Ida B. Wells, who lost both of her parents to a traumatic sickness and illness, but she stood up, even though she was grieving, and educated her siblings and her community. She fought out against lynching and suffrage issues for Black women. So this is how she facilitated her healing process. Maya Angelou, she didn't speak for about 5 years or so after having a harsh situation as a child dealing with abuse, but she took pain and transformed it to power. And she wrote, became an actress. She told her story, and telling her story and expressing herself helped it to get out. Even Malcolm X, when he was young, his father was murdered due to white supremacy, and his mother went to a mental institution, and Malcolm X, dropped out of school when he was told that being a lawyer is no job for a Black boy like you. But when he got locked up and when he went to prison, he ended up getting mentored by Elijah Muhammad, and that ended up really impacting his trajectory in his life's narrative. And he would come out of prison and devote his life to his people. Martin Luther King, another lesson in history. It was said that as Martin Luther King traveled, he had migraine headaches, and there were times he needed to slow down. And so when we think about what he did, that's a lesson to us. Sometimes we might need to slow down and take it easy as well too. Rosa Parks, I didn't know that she did yoga, and that she was an activist, and that she was an NAACP, and we know about the bus boycott and all of those things. I did not know that she took to yoga to spend more time with her family, friends, and loved ones. So once again, how can we use history, or how can we examine history through the lens of healing and wellness? Our ancestors and those that have come before us have given us different remnants and different things that we can use and apply for today. So just wanted, for the sake of time, just say the valuable work we did at the TI Holistic Wellness Center brought a lot of great things to the forefront in terms of what we're talking about today. Dr. Dahl, Dr. Dennis also Winkler, I learned so much from him, and we learned a lot from our community. Ancestral veneration, working with the young people, working in our community, meditation and mindfulness. These are the things that can play a huge part. Drumming, cultural immersion. These are the things that we can really tap into and utilize to help ourselves along the way. Here's some more gentle reminders. And I know some of us may be like, I know that, Brother Sankofa, I know, da, 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 da. But I would say, hey, nothing wrong with a little bit of a reminder. So let's make sure we're getting rest. Let's make sure we're moving and metabolizing when we need to metabolize, setting those boundaries, and we're saying no when we need to. Not all the time, but we say it when we need to say it. We stretch, we're drinking water, we're getting out in nature, we're just pausing when we need to, whatever that looks like for us. Healthy relationships are crucial. Fun and novelty, all of that stuff plays a part. All of that stuff is important. Our diet, what we take in, our outlets of expression, whether it's music and art and all those types of things. Those are the things that are really critical. And those are the things I believe that are going to be able to help us along the way. So I don't have too much left. I'm not going to show this. I could always perhaps share with everybody at, later on. But as I get to an end, I just want to say that we are living history. We have the capacity to be makers of history with a huge opportunity to influence our situation. Let's embrace our untapped power that we have yet to realize. And so I think we're going to end it there. There's so much that this conversation can still have, but I know we're getting up to 6 o'clock, and I just wanted to, with a little bit of time we have left, just once again, just open up the floor. If there were any final reflections or comments, I do once again appreciate this opportunity to be able to share some of what I've uncovered in my field and my experiences. And I'm still learning every day, and I love it. But nevertheless, I just wanted to open up the floor for those who are still with us one more time before we transition on up out of here for today. Okay, thank you, Katima. Thank you, appreciate that. Thank you for your presence. Was there anybody else who wanted to?
Thank you so very much. I'm planning to join this group, and I wanted to have heard at least one presentation that ties to you, and I am very committed to finding the links to join your group. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, and I appreciate your presence, and glad that after today you're going to stay connected with all the wonderful things happening. And I can definitely share some resources for those who would like some further tidbits with what was covered today. Anything else?
Thank you so much. That was an excellent presentation. I enjoyed it.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you and everybody else. Thank you.
I just want to also say thank you. I know I've been quiet most of the time. I'm in getting set up for a pre-college program and students moving in, but I've been listening. But I just want to say thank you. So I was over here in tears for a little bit because I was just like reflecting on some of the things that I've been through, and like when we were talking about the like racial battle fatigue. And so I think now that I'm in a space where I'm not experiencing a lot of that, like it's expressing and coming out that way. So I was just super appreciative to be like in this group today and just, recognizing like what I've been feeling like I'm not losing it. So, and just all the information. I was screenshotting the books too, because I love to read. So appreciate that.
Appreciate you. And spaces like this are meant to be therapeutic in and of themselves. And so I know there's been great work happening here long before today, but I'm glad that I could just contribute and play my part with all the wonderful things happening. Once again, I got to give another shout out to my beloved brother, Dr. Dennis All-Star Winkler, for making a way for me to even be here to be able to speak to everybody today. So I'm so humbled and so honored to be able to be here. Thank you, Stephanie. Dr. Dennis Winkler, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you, my good brother. I mean, unless there's something else from somebody.
Well, if there's no one else, I would just say thank you. I appreciate the presentation. I've seen variations. All you come with so much from various angles, and I appreciate to see how this one would unfold. And I think you created a narrative and told a story of resilience, resistance, and liberation. And I appreciate that. And I appreciate the Dr. Gilliam. I'm thinking you saying you kind of you're gonna stick around and all that type of thing. All right, so Brother Sankofa, you're making us look good over here at the Association of Black Counselors. We are good. And maybe we can we can talk about maybe you doing some things at the conference and maybe even coming a member, Mr. Nicks. So nonetheless, and I thank everybody for joining in, tuning in. We will be doing this again, and I think we do this quarterly. So we'll be doing something like this again in September. I think I will be the speaker that time, or unless I think I may have someone. I'm kind of like this. I'm writing a book, so I might have somebody else or myself come and speak next time, Brother Nicks. And just know this place is we're open to as you grow and as you share, and anyone on this call on this Zoom. If you have something, talk to us, talk to me. If anyone wants to even coordinate with the educational committee, if you want to present some things, we can do some things in-house. So I really appreciate it. I appreciate Dr. Nick for trusting me and spearheading this committee. I appreciate Brother Curtis Warren, who's also co-coordinating with me in this committee, and anybody else who wants to really join us and help us in this educational department. Just send me an email, DennisWinkler@iCloud.com. Give me a shout. I'm a real person, so I'll give you my number, 443-333-2970. I know this is on YouTube. I'm a public person. Pardon. so nonetheless, 443-333-2970. And Brother Nicks, thank you again. Wonderful presentation. Family, take care. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you in September, if not before then, in some other capacity. Take care.
Thank you all.